At my parents' anniversary party, my sister gave a toast, thanking them for raising an only child. My mother raised her glass, and my father beamed. I stood up and said something that stunned the table. I hadn't meant to cause a scene. Instead, I had come here to make amends, to prove that I could move on and grow. The party venue was exactly what you'd expect from a couple who'd argued about whether their dog should have a middle name. Elegant, clean, and a little boring in beige, where the waiters whispered and the food was looked at more than eaten. I arrived 3 minutes early, but still felt late. My sister was already drawing attention, her hair perfectly coiffed, her makeup photogenic, her air of snobbery like she was campaigning or recruiting for a new cult. She greeted me with an air kiss and a soft, contemptuous tone reserved for big occasions and formal meetings. "You're here," she said, as if I were just a passing acquaintance on the street. I smiled back, but it was as sour as a paper knife. My mother hugged me awkwardly, my father nodded like he was meeting a mechanic in the cereal aisle. I was seated at the end of the table, next to a ficus tree, across from my cousin's new boyfriend, who had introduced himself twice and still got my name wrong. But I didn't react. No glares, no irritability, no checking my watch or making a scene. I told myself I had a purpose in coming there, that maybe if I opened up this time, things would change. Not perfectly, but at least polite and bearable, because I had brought something important, carefully prepared for months. The envelope was still in my pocket, its edges soft from repeated handling. It wasn't just a check, but a gentle, heartfelt message that said, "No matter what, I want to connect." Dinner began. The room buzzed like an old fluorescent light. My sister told me about a conference she had spoken at, and my parents listened as intently as if she were reciting the Constitution. When I shared my new freedom project, my mother blinked and asked, "Do you have health insurance?" By the time the soup was served, I had answered only 2 questions, neither of which were about me. Then came the toasts. My sister stood, raised her glass, and smiled with practiced precision. "I want to thank everyone for coming here today to celebrate the 2 of you who raised me to be the woman I am today," she said. There was applause, and I clapped back, like a trained seal. Then she continued, turning to my parents, with all the carefully orchestrated warmth, "I want to thank you for raising the most wonderful, only child anyone could ever hope for." No one laughed, and I waited in silence, hoping my mother would say, "Oh, don't forget your sister," or my father would cough hoarsely, something to break the silence. But no, my mother raised her glass and my father smiled like in a Christmas photo. Not a single glance was directed at me. I almost burst into flames. And the only response was asking the waiter for more water. The noise in my ears subsided. Not in an exaggerated way, not in a movie way, just a stifling silence, as if I had accepted a joke that everyone had laughed at for years. I stood up without realizing I was moving. I pulled out the envelope and headed toward the center of the dining room. No clinking glasses, no preamble, just a steady, steady voice. "I have something to give to the people who raised me," I said. "But there's been a misunderstanding." Everyone stirred, looked around. My sister's face was blank. My mother opened her mouth as if to say something but couldn't find the right tone. I turned to the table behind me, where my aunt and uncle sat, like second-class relatives invited out of pity. They looked shocked. Her hand jerked suddenly, her chest heaved. My uncle seemed to disappear from the face of the earth. I handed them the envelope, no drama, no words, just, "This is for you." Then I sat back down. No one said anything. No plates clanged, no chairs moved. The silence was like a bomb that hadn't gone off yet. My sister opened her eyes as if she were trying to reset her brain. My mother tilted her head in that familiar way she did when she was trying to convince herself. She had witnessed something deeply uncomfortable. My father's expression was unreadable, but his jaw was clenched. My aunt and uncle looked at the envelope like it had a timer inside. I said nothing more, and no one asked. The dinner passed in a strange tension, like a moment when all the air in the room was sucked out, leaving no one knowing how to breathe. But I breathed for the first time in years. I breathed because I was no longer waiting for anything. Not for recognition, not for permission, not to be seen. They had raised only one child. So I gave myself to those who could see me. They say when someone shows you who they are, believe them. I used to think that was just a social media saying, next to pictures of minimalist bedrooms and avocado toast. But maybe Maya Angelou knew something I didn't. My parents showed me who they were when I was old enough to understand the difference between the golden child and what I wasn't. The signs were always there, subtle at first, like the way my sister's pasta art hung on the fridge while mine was repurposed as a shopping list. Or how my parents applauded when my sister sang out of tune in the school play, while I was speechless. When I won the regional writing competition, I brought home the trophy. I remember my dad glancing over and saying, "Competitive spelling is not a sport." When I was 8, I asked for a bike. My sister got a pink one with tassels, a matching helmet, and training wheels. Me? A long speech about how I should be content with my old bike. It was my neighbor's kid's bike, covered in mud. But I tried anyway, thinking that if I was nicer, gentler, more helpful, there would be some room for me. I babysat, washed dishes, and got straight A's. But Mom said that was the bare minimum. When my sister got a B+ in history, there was a cake. When I graduated, my parents forgot to book a restaurant. We ended up eating fast food because my dad said French fries were better. My sister had a private hall for her graduation, with a slideshow, a speech, and a gift with her name on it. It was like she was giving a TED Talk, not getting a degree. I didn't give up. I told myself I didn't need it. I just kept nodding. I kept living like a mini-me. And they saw it first. They didn't make a fuss. They didn't claim to be saviors. But they were there in quiet, important ways. They used to babysit me when my parents needed a break. I remember the first time they picked me up at age 5. My mom handed me over like a lunchbox, told me not to stay up too late because I was a picky eater. They didn't think I was a nuisance. Made popcorn, showed me movies. When I cried because I was scared of the endless book, she held my hand and said, "It's just pretending to be scared, honey." The time I spilled orange juice on the white carpet and cried because my family was scolding me for something so trivial. She just wiped it with a towel and said, "It's just a mess. You're more precious than that." When I was sick in college and couldn't afford cold medicine, my uncle drove 2 hours to bring me soup and cough drops. My dad just sent the thumbs up emoji, no words, which was my mom's suggestion. I tried herbal tea when I got my first job and was worried I wouldn't make it. She emailed me every day to cheer me up. My parents were there for birthdays and emergencies, but they were also judgmental. When I got out of a toxic relationship and had no place to stay, they cleaned up the living room for me. My mom told me I should try harder to keep my dream job. I told them in advance, because I knew how it would go. I was tired of shrinking. I tried to explain to my mother the damage of living in my sister's shadow. She sneered and said I was being too sensitive. "At least we didn't spoil you." She was right. They didn't spoil me, but my aunt and uncle did. They saw me, heard me, and gave me space to exist without having to prove anything. And in our family, that was revolutionary. A few weeks before the party, I sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, and realized I felt more at home there than at home. My uncle told a little story about how he set off the fire alarm while making pancakes. My aunt glared at him but couldn't hide her smile. They loved me without needing me to change. I half-jokingly said, "I used to wish I was your kid." She looked at me and said, "You're already family." Those words stuck with me. When I walked into the party, I had no plans to say anything, no plans to do anything. Even though the envelope was still in my pocket, I still held out hope that my parents would surprise me. But they wrote me off gently, publicly. For the first time, I accepted that. I wasn't being left out because I hadn't tried hard enough, but because they didn't want to look. I looked away and found what I was looking for. The envelope was unopened. The next morning, I got a text from her, just a question mark. I waited and called back. They hadn't opened it. I said sure. He hesitated and asked if I should. I said they never went too far. They opened the envelope together, just the sound of paper fluttering and silence. No sighs, no cheers, just silence that made me feel relieved. I transferred $50,000 into their joint account. No strings attached, no details, no tricks. Just a simple thank you for the kindness they had given without ever asking for anything in return. She said, trembling, "We don't deserve this." I said, "You were there, you loved me, you saw me. That's enough." He said, "You don't know what this means to us." I said, "I know. That's why I did it. I thought it would end there. A clean end, a simple act, wrapped in peace. But no. My family doesn't work that way." After 5 hours, my phone lights up. The first call is from my mother. I don't answer. The second call leaves a voicemail. I listen to it on speaker as I fold laundry. "You've done enough. This is a farce. This isn't funny. Call me back." The third call is from my sister. I don't answer either. A text message comes in, asking if the money is real. "Why did you give it to your uncle and aunt? They didn't raise you. You're too much. Humiliating us." I didn't reply, because I was laughing, a mad laugh as the absurdity collapsed under its own weight. After a while, Dad joined in. He didn't usually text. He thought long messages with emojis were political intrigue. But the situation was special. Dad texted, "We need to talk face to face, not over text." Which meant he didn't know how to explain it yet, but needed time. Then came the regrouping phase. My parents shut down, tried to control the conversation, mobilized the family like a political campaign. I had not seen them for a long time, and I received messages from 2 relatives. One asked if I was okay because he heard something was wrong, the other asked what I had said to Lorna, what was her name. My mother was very worried. The family was mobilized, I became unstable, out of control, attention-seeking. But I didn't argue back. Didn't explain, didn't argue. I let them deal with their silence. Then one day they came in unannounced, in the afternoon. I opened the door to find my mother in her pressed blouse and pearls, my father standing there as if he were about to invite me to see the grill. I said nothing, just leaned against the doorframe. "I want to come in," she said. "No," Mom blinked, and Dad looked past me into the living room as if searching for a secret hidden in a pillow. "Don't you want to talk? I see you guys toasting your only child and not paying attention to me." Mom sighed. "It was just a joke." No one laughed. "We didn't mean it, did you?" I crossed my arms. "You haven't said anything all night." Dad straightened. "Then you're surprising us. How ironic that someone who's been erased would do that." Dad said, $50. "Sarah, are you really going to give us that?" "Yes. But I'm giving it to the people who raised you." I didn't answer because it was the truth. Mom's voice was tense. "That money could help us retire early, pay off the car loan, and cure your father's illness." "I know. That's why I'm saving." Dad looked at me without blinking. "So why did you change?" I smiled, not in a friendly way. "She raised her glass to you as an only child." Mom avoided eye contact. Dad's jaw clenched. "So this is revenge?" "No, it's recognition. I give thanks to those who deserve it. You're throwing away your family. You've chosen a new family." They left without a loud bang, just as quietly as a heavy door closing. My sister continued the attack, posting vague, emotionally manipulative statuses on social media with photos of my parents' wedding, captioned, "Some people only show up when they need the buzz. Real family is there quietly." I didn't respond, nor did I need it. The next day, my aunt called, embarrassed. They had texts and phone calls from my mother and sister, trying to force me. I wasn't being manipulated. I simply said, I hated it. But they didn't want to be in the middle of the fight. I'm not in the middle. I'm always there for you. My aunt was silent, then said, we didn't open the envelope. We didn't need the money. You can take it because it's a gift, I said. I have to. I can't go back and fix it, but I can say thank you properly. She sobbed. I smiled, even though they couldn't see. I thought I was the one alone last night. I sat on the porch, wine in my glass, looking at the stars. I don't feel triumphant or proud, but I feel at peace, like I'm in the right place. The aftermath isn't over yet, but I'm no longer afraid, because when the dust settles, they'll still be there. They, who don't need proof, who don't need to show off, knew who I was when I was still searching for myself, and now they know what they mean to me. I thought the silence would be the end, like after a storm, everything is strangely quiet, seemingly over. That is, I sat quietly, hoping that my family would accept this loss, retreat into their own cold bubble. But that is not how they operate. Silence is not peace, it is a trap. A phone call from my cousin Theo, whom I had not been in touch with for a long time, woke up the storm. He did not remember birthdays and did not use Facebook much, so when his name appeared, I did not answer. The voice message, your mother told me about the money. Watch your social media. I went to Facebook and saw my mother's long, vague post, with spiritual quotes, fake morals, humility, a preemptive strike, making her look like she was in pain. I was not mentioned by name, but everyone knew. It hurts parents when their children are lured by a fake, she said. Family is not about money, it's about loyalty. We did our best, why should we be punished? There were comments under the post from church friends, old neighbors, acquaintances, saying I was unworthy, thanks to my parents' good upbringing, forgetting who held them when they were young. One day they will regret it. I almost laughed, but my hands were shaking. Then my aunt called nervously, saying she had received an anonymous email with screenshots of old messages I had sent, complaining about them, tired of being bothered, needing space. I had never been unfaithful, just human when tired. The sender was my sister, leaving a telltale trace. She was honest and that made me believe, different from the rest of them. I drove to my aunt and uncle's house, carrying the box of cookies, my heart heavy. I'm sorry. For everything and anything that ever made you doubt me. She didn't say much, just held my hand. He made coffee. No big words, just presence. That was real love. No need to prove it. I knew it was time to stop trying to patch up a ship that was never good enough, to stop calling it family just because of blood. I wrote a letter, not angry, not blaming, just stating the boundaries. Requesting no more contact, not through other people, not twisting the story, not expecting reconciliation. I sent the letter by post so no one could say I didn't receive it. A week later, my mother called from an unknown number. I left the phone on hold. She cried and was angry, saying I had broken up the family, broken my father's heart. I thought, yes, I am proud. They continued to pressure my aunt and uncle to return the money, sending formal letters, implying that they were being manipulated, saying I was unstable. I offered to pay for the legal fees, but my uncle said he wouldn't accept money from the family, but he would accept gifts. That winter, I stayed with my aunt and uncle, just the three of us. No expectations, no drama. We cooked together, played cards, watched old movies in pajamas, laughed for no reason. My aunt gave me a scarf she knitted herself, my uncle made me hot chocolate that burned and he drank it anyway. It was the best Christmas I've ever had. At one point, she asked, "Do you regret it?" I didn't have to think much about it. No. I didn't leave my family and go find another family. I stopped looking for attention, choosing those who saw me. Eventually the calls stopped. The noise died down. They found new support, new stories. I didn't. I stayed with my small, peaceful life, where love had no strings attached, kindness had no strings attached. Sometimes I still remember the party, my sister's face when I handed the envelope to someone else, my mother's surprised expression, my father's clenched teeth. Those images used to haunt me, now they remind me of the night I stopped apologizing for just existing. The night I said enough and meant it. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing. It wasn't about giving the money to my uncle and aunt, that was still true in my heart. It was the moment, the way I did it, the public declaration, the silence I left behind. Was it too much or not enough? I didn't want to embarrass anyone, I just couldn't pretend anymore. I had sleepless nights wondering if waiting, handing over the envelope privately, would have lessened the shock or made it easier for them to tell their story. What do you think? Did I do the right thing? Was it justified? Or was there a better way to leave? Let me know your thoughts. If you want to hear more heartwarming stories of family and personal perseverance, don't forget to subscribe.